In the wide world of competitive Pokemon, there are two separate nations, Smogon singles and VGC doubles. However, in either of these, have you ever seen a Ferrothorn do this? The replay you just saw was taken from a format that exists in both Smogon and cartridge play. A format that almost no one I've spoken to about competitive Pokemon even knows exists. The format in question? Pokemon Draft League. Here's the gist of how it works. A list is made with every Pokemon in the game at varying tiers depending on how strong they are. 8 to 16 people are placed in a random order and given a set number of points to make their draft. They each take turns choosing Pokemon until they have a full draft or they run out of points. After that, you play against a different team every week until finally the top teams go into a playoffs bracket and whoever wins is the champion. Now that you've heard the fast version, let's rewind and go into a bit more detail, starting with the draft. The draft itself is the most unique thing about the format. It's completely unlike any Smogon tier or VGC, where you have complete freedom with your team building. Why? Well, there's two important things to understand about the draft. First, the fact that there's only one Pokemon of each species on the board. You drafted Landorus? Congratulations, that's your Landorus now. None of the other teams can pick it. This also means one of the Pokemon you wanted can end up getting stolen by other teams, so you really have to adapt on the fly with your team building. The fact that there's only one of every Pokemon also means that Pokemon that are usually outclassed by another similar Pokemon get a chance to shine as budget picks. You know how Xianpao completely invalidates Weavile in Gen 9 OU? In Draft, even though Xianpao still makes Weavile look like a used dish rag, Weavile is a solid pick if you can't get your hands on Xianpao. It saves you some points since it's cheaper and fills the same role. Garchomp got sniped? Try Flygon, or maybe Zygarde 10%. There's a ton more examples, but in essence, the idea is this. Draft gives every Pokemon a chance to shine. The fact that there's only one of every Pokemon available also means that your team feels more personal, sort of similar to how it would in a Nuzlocke. I found myself getting attached to Pokemon that I drafted before, especially when they're more unique picks. That leads me to the second important thing to note about Draft. You're gonna have to use some crappy Pokemon. You might have been hearing that whole attachment thing and thinking, how am I gonna get attached to a frickin' Lando T? And I get that, but you gotta realize that you're usually only able to get 3 or 4 OU level Pokemon in your entire draft. The backbone of your team is gonna be the low tiers, and finding what garbage Pokemon can fill holes in your team is half the fun. Sure, Lando T may be a common Pokemon that everyone uses, but what about Carkol? You ever seen a Carkol cripple a Mega Lopunny with a burn and set up hazards? How about Mega Ampharos cleaning up with agility? These low tiers are the make or break of any good draft team, and when you really think outside the box to find a super random Pokemon that fits your team, that's when you get really attached. Draft gives even the most garbage Pokemon a niche and a chance to shine against real OU level monsters. There's some things in Draft that you won't see in any other format, whether it be low tiers versus top tiers or just crazy sets. Speaking of which, next up, let's talk about the main season. Like I said earlier, your draft gets matched against another team every week, and you play a 2 to 3 month long season until the playoffs. You have about 10 Pokemon to choose from every game, but you can only bring 6, and so can your opponent. This is where another gigantic difference between VGC or Smogon presents itself. Instead of prepping for the entire metagame, in Draft, you're only prepping with your opponent's Pokemon in mind. Your team needs to be suited specifically to face a pool of about 10 Pokemon, meaning you get to see sets tailor-made to counter the opposing team. Let's call this the benefit of foresight, and let's use the match from the start of the video as an example. My friend Byoji was facing a rain team, so knowing this, he brought an insane set. Choice Specs, Thunder, Ferrothorn. Could he have used a more standard Ferrothorn set? Sure, but the element of surprise is a very real and powerful tool in Pokemon. When your opponent can see what Pokemon they're going to be facing, it's even more important to have those Pokemon do unexpected things. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to run wacky sets on every Pokemon. Standard stuff is usually fine, but every once in a while, you get what I like to call Draft League magic, the type of set that you can only see when you have the benefit of foresight. Stuff like Choice Banded Misdreavus with Trick and Destiny Bond, Shadow Sneak, and Will-O-Wisp. Yes, that's right, I brought an unevolved Pokemon with only 55 attack into a game, gave it a Choice Band with only 1 attacking move. Why? Well, my opponent had Alakazam, and I had 0 way to win if that thing clicked Nasty Plot. So, Choice Banded Shadow Sneak was sort of insurance since it barely kills Alakazam. And hey, It worked. Of course, these types of sets don't always work and sometimes horribly backfire, but hey, when they work, magic, baby. The final part of any draft league is the playoffs bracket, where the teams with the best records from the main season move on to a single elim bracket. Now, during the main season there are no rematches, you only play every other team once, but during the playoffs you do have the possibility of playing rematches. These are crazy hype, and the fact that only one match lost in a game as volatile as Pokemon will lead to elimination is both the best and the worst part. Sure, the Leffen in me is saying that single elim best of one is an absolutely, abhorrently terrible format for a bracket that serves as the finale of over 2 months of play, but there's no but, honestly. It's pretty bad, yeah. It's pretty bad. Still, some of the hypest games are when the underdogs defeat the teams that have been ruling the season. Resident First Seed Destroyer Nor here provides us with 2 examples, using Endure Salakberry Blacephalon to destroy one, and Belly Drum Quick Claw Quick Draw Slowbro to destroy another. Both number 1 teams throughout the whole season eliminated in round 1. Absolutely wild. I haven't mentioned it yet, but these leagues are pretty much always run on Discord servers, and since each one is a small community, the storylines that form around the best players in each group and the season-long stories are amazing. It's sort of like an anime tournament arc, but for nerds who have too much time on their hands. Some leagues are more tight-knit than others, but it's always hype to see champions play against underdogs or 2 players who've been talking a lot of shit go at it. Now you've got a pretty in-depth understanding of how the format works and why I love it so much. So let's look at the other side of this coin and ask, why is this format so unknown and what are some of the problems with it? I got a lot to say on this topic and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, so let's start talking about the biggest problem with the format. It is a huge time commitment. For about 2 months, you have to prepare a new team and play a game every single week, making sure you and your opponent can settle on a time and a day. Half the time, you're scheduling with some dude from fucking India who's 8 hours ahead of you and is going to be mad if you don't show up at 6 AM to face him in virtual cockfighting. There's really no saving grace I can point out here. It is absolutely understandable that a ton of people either don't have the time or don't want to commit the time to playing in such a long season, especially when you can get a sample team and load up a game on Showdown Ladder in less than 5 minutes. This is definitely the biggest thing that holds the format back from being more popular. The second thing holding this format back is definitely accessibility. Draft is barely mentioned on Showdown aside from a small little side chat at the very bottom that was added recently, and if you do end up wanting to commit your time to a league, you have to dig through a bunch of crappy Discord servers, fill out applications, and wait for one of them to accept you. It's a chore, and even for someone who's been playing for over 2 years now, I still get rejected from leagues I apply to regularly. Third, and this is the first gameplay related problem, the fact that you can prep for your opponent's specific team might be a detriment for some people. I mentioned it as a positive earlier, but your opponent being able to see your team and vice versa means it's common for Pokemon to have perfect coverage and become incredibly hard to answer. Let's use Superior as an example. On Ladder, it'll have to choose between Hidden Power Fire for Ferrothorn or Hidden Power Ground for Heatran, but in Draft, you can always just use whichever one you need for the Pokemon you'll be facing. It can be pretty lame at times, especially when Hidden Power is allowed, but I think that the positives of being able to see the team you'll be facing outweigh the negatives. Phew, alright, let's switch back to something a little more positive to end off this video. A rapid fire showcase of a couple interesting games and sets that I've seen during my draft career. Before we get to that though, did you know that 99% of my viewers are subscribed? That's right, the only one who isn't is you. You should subscribe and make that a nice clean 100%. Anyway, I'll only be going through the critical moments of these games, so I won't be taking too long with them. Quick thank you to all my friends who helped me compile these. Love you guys. I'll be sure to shout out each one of you on your respective replays. Finally, as a quick rule of thumb, the one who submitted the replay will always be on the player side. Now that all the preamble is done, let's start with these 2 games from the previously mentioned Nor. These really show some out-of-the-box thinking and planning, using unconventional coverage moves to bait in a Pokemon's counters and beat them. First, Rock Blast Blacephalon absolutely chunking Incineroar here even with the Intimidate, and setting up a speed boost with Flame Charge to clean up. Second, we have Glalie using Natural Gift Fire, since Hidden Power is banned, to beat Mega Scizor. This one in particular is a great example of many points I've made earlier, a low tier Pokemon beating an OU staple because of the benefit of foresight and good preparation. To finish off Nora's replays, here's an insane copycat low punny strategy that would have won immediately if Flame Body didn't activate. Just imagine if he had Facade though. Minior also ended this game with a 1v5 comeback while paralyzed, which was pretty insane. In this next replay from Felum, we're going to see how even a Pokemon as one note as Dracovish can beat its counters with good preparation. Milotic with a Flame Orb usually hard walls Dracovish since it boosts its defense, but it can't really do much damage to it directly. So with Rest and Sleep Talk, this Dracovish manages to outstall the Milotic and win the game. Next up, we have another low tier showcase, this time from JM. Tangela is a great low tier pick, and here we see a substitute set 1v6 against several uber and top tier Pokemon like Urshifu, Zeraora, and Mega Aerodactyl. Next up is Big Red Blue, running a Sunny Day Gengar so that Heatran can absolutely obliterate everything on this team with Eruption and Solar Beam. You might be seeing a trend with the earlier Mega Scizor and now this Swampert. Pokemon with ×4 weaknesses aren't as good when you can prepare for them and pack the appropriate coverage moves. This next one is actually a set that I helped make, Gabe's Physical Throat Chop Hydreigon. Throat Chop is a move that disables the opponent's sound-based attacks, so it disables Sylveon's Hyper Voice, which would usually kill Hydreigon. He can then set up with Dragon Dance for free since Sylveon can't attack him at all after the Throat Chop. It's a really creative set and a pretty genius solution to have a Hydreigon beat a Sylveon, completely turning the matchup on its head. If only the other Hydreigon set I gave Gabe had actually hit its moves. Alright, so I mentioned earlier about how there are doubles leagues, but I don't really play in them. To keep the VGC players interested though, here's the only doubles game in this video. This is a 2v2 multi-battle league where I'm teaming up with Byoji, the same guy from the Thunder Ferrothorn earlier. We're using a Trick Room strategy with Mega Camerupt against a Rain team in the first round of playoffs. Yes, that's right, a Pokemon ×4 weak to water was our main strategy to beat a Rain team. Here's how the strategy works. Dusclops is always going to be faster than Camerupt and Trick Room, so as long as we click Sunny Day every single turn, they can't get Rain up because even if they switch in Pelipper, the Sunny Day will activate. We also got every read right because we're just the best team, undisputed. Me and Byoji, we're the best, we're just the best. Speaking of Byoji, he's the star of our next two replays. He likes to use specific counter lead sets against obvious leads a lot of the time, and this is one of my favorites. Zoroark disguised as Regieleki with an air balloon to make it seem even more real. It does end up getting a kill too. Imagine if Regieleki actually got Nasty Plot. Next is a classic Byoji replay, and this one is the first replay that has a little bit of a story behind it. His opponent is called AC, and he entered this league last season and won the entire thing without losing a single game. Byoji went on record and told us that he would be the first one to beat AC, and just when things were looking really bad, he pulls out this weakness policy Rock Polish Diancie. No Mega Diancie needed. This low tier completely changes the tide of the game, getting 3 kills and setting up for Dracovish and Heatran to close it out. In the end, Byoji did become the first person to beat AC, just like he promised. Now we finally get to my games, and for these, I can give a little background. First up, I'm going against this player called Toxic, who's a really good player who I've seen win multiple leagues, so I really wanted to win this game. He has a Toxapex and an Unaware Clefable, so how am I going to break through this? The answer I came up with was using Stored Power Latias with Weakness Policy and Dragon Dance to outspeed his entire team. Stored Power has a base power increase for every stat boost, which means that it doesn't get affected by Unaware, so I baited a knockoff from Toxapex and swept everything from there. Next up is just this normal replay of me using Charizard X, nothing special, Charizard X always gonna just be doing his normal thing. Yeah, Charizard X, just Charizard X. Anyway, here's another low tier showcase. Now, you remember that I said that Xian Pao makes Weavile look like a used dish rag? Well, in that case, Xian Pao makes Sneasel look like a pile of shit on the side of the road. But it's still good enough to hit everything on Felum's team and set up for a win here. Finally, there's this playoffs rematch where I left to get an Uber Eats order in the middle of the most important turn of the game and came back and somehow won this Sucker Punch mind game unintentionally. Now you may call that icing, but I call that skill. Alright, that went on way longer than I expected, but it's finally the end. To finish up this video, I'll just say that Draft is a great format, and I've met a lot of great people playing it. If you are interested in trying it yourself, I'll leave a Discord server link or two in the comments where you can dig around for leagues to join. It's a tedious process, and like I said, it's not the most accessible format, but I definitely think it's worth your time. I'll also leave a doc that you can use as a template to make your own draft league if you and a couple friends want to try it. The draft community is kind of in a weird state right now. We lost our custom showdown server, sports.psim, and a big community leader and administrator of the Draft League website, Automathic, stepped down and discontinued the site. I'm sure that any league around would really appreciate the support right now. If you've watched this far, be sure to subscribe for more videos in the future and comment letting me know your favorite set shown off in the video. This has been Jiggy Poo, and thank you so much for watching.